All right, so get this. Today's deep dive is, well, it's a real head scratcher.
Oh, tell me more.
We're going deep into some heavy stuff, like really heavy. Purpose, motivation, the meaning of life, the big stuff.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Where are we starting this existential journey?
Believe it or not, a Reddit philosophy debate.
Ah, Reddit, the eternal fountain of profound philosophical inquiry.
Right. And to make things even more interesting, we're throwing in a Dr. K stream transcript into the mix.
That is an interesting combo.
Yeah.
So we've got ancient Eastern philosophy meets modern-day skepticism.
Exactly. And it all starts with this one Redditor's, full-on existential crisis.
Oh.
Yeah, they're questioning everything. Are these big concepts, Dharma and Dukkha, are they actually useful?
Okay, useful or...
Or are they just copium, a way to cope with the fact that life, is kind of rough sometimes?
The old life is suffering dilemma.
Right. And then they bring up reincarnation.
Okay, how does that fit in?
Well, they're basically saying, what if it's just a convenient way to avoid accepting, the whole this is it reality of life?
It's a fair question, actually.
Yes.
One that a lot of people grapple with.
Totally. And then it gets even better. They point out how these schools of thought, they wouldn't exist if people didn't buy into them.
What do you mean?
They need followers to survive. It's like they're saying these philosophies need us to validate them.
That's a really interesting point. I mean, it kind of highlights how these concepts, they're meant to be lived and experienced, not just studied, right?
Totally.
And that's where Dr. K comes in.
Okay, so we've got this Redditor throwing down a pretty direct challenge to some pretty big concepts. How does Dr. K respond?
He actually addresses this Reddit post directly in his stream. And he starts by acknowledging something pretty important.
Oh.
Yeah, he talks about the limitations of learning about spirituality from certain places. Like from books and videos or even...
Wait, hold on. Are you saying listening to this deep dive won't lead to instant enlightenment?
Not quite.
Phew. Okay, good, because we are definitely not qualified to hand out enlightenment certificates.
Definitely not. But seriously, Dr. K makes a really good point here. He's saying that there's a big difference between information, right? Just knowing about something.
Right.
And actual transformation, embodying that knowledge. He compares it to, get this, learning about sex from watching porn.
Okay, I was not expecting that comparison, but go on.
Right. You might think you know what's going on, but you're missing a pretty fundamental element of the experience.
Okay, yeah, I see where he's going with that.
Yeah.
So how do we bridge that gap? How do we move beyond just intellectually understanding these ideas to actually experiencing them?
Get this. He suggests that we might not need more motivation at all.
Hold on. Did I miss a memo? Is motivation out?
Not exactly out, but Dr. K argues that constantly chasing after it can be a trap.
Okay, I'm listening. How is motivation a trap?
Well, he suggests that our wants, the things we think we need to be motivated to pursue,
right,
they're often fleeting. And even more importantly, they're heavily influenced by outside forces.
Ooh, okay, so those targeted ads that seem to know us better than we know ourselves.
Exactly. It's like social media has become a masterclass in creating desires we didn't even know we had.
Ouch, that hits close to home.
Right? So Dr. K argues that relying on this external motivation, it leads to this constant chasing after the next high, the next dopamine hit, which, let's be honest, rarely lives up to the hype.
So if we're not supposed to be chasing the next dopamine hit, what should we be doing instead? Don't leave us hanging.
Dr. K suggests that instead of seeking more motivation, we need to embrace something most of us try to avoid at all costs.
Oh, no, don't tell me. Let me guess, it's something awful.
It's boredom.
Boredom. You're telling me the key to a fulfilling life is embracing the void.
I know it sounds strange, but stick with me. Dr. K argues that boredom, when approached with the right mindset, can actually lead to self-discovery.
Okay, I'm going to need some convincing on this one, but go on.
It's like in those moments of stillness, when we're not constantly bombarding ourselves with distractions, that our true needs and desires can actually surface.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. So it's not about the boredom itself, but about what we learn about ourselves when we resist the urge to immediately fill that space.
Exactly. And this actually connects back to the Redditor's struggle with Dharma. Remember, they weren't convinced there's some grand purpose out there for them.
Right. They were like, why bother with all this effort and suffering if there's no big payoff?
Yeah, and Dr. K might actually agree with them, at least when it comes to the idea of a capital D Dharma, like this big, predetermined path in life. He actually argues that chasing after a big, flashy purpose can make us less content, not more.
Which is interesting coming from him, right? He's talked about how even going to Harvard, winning all those awards in med school, it didn't erase that underlying feeling of emptiness.
Exactly. And that brings us to Dr. K's definition of Dharma, which is a bit different. He describes it as finding harmony, both internally and in the way we move through the world.
Okay, finding harmony. That's a pretty big concept. How do we even begin to find that?
Dr. K suggests starting with small, daily actions, what he calls practical dharmas. These small actions, he argues, they create this ripple effect that extends outward.
So what are these practical dharmas? Give us the secrets.
He recommends things like taking daily walks, eating healthier, paying attention to our body's needs.
That's it. Those sound pretty, well, simple.
Exactly. But don't underestimate their power. He argues that by focusing on these seemingly small things, we're actually tuning into ourselves in a deeper way.
So no need to quit my job and move to a monastery just yet.
Not yet. But it does beg the question, how does something as simple as going for a walk connect to this bigger idea of purpose and meaning?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of why this Reddit post and Dr. K's response fit together so well. Okay, you've officially piqued my curiosity. Tell me more.
It's all about building a foundation,
A foundation for what?
self-awareness, discipline. It's like by taking care of these basic things like our physical health,
Right.
we start to understand our needs and desires better, you see.
Okay, I'm with you. So by focusing on these, I guess, kind of simple actions, we're actually tuning in to ourselves in a deeper way.
Exactly. And that deeper connection to ourselves, that's what allows us to approach like life's challenges, even boredom with more intention, maybe even a little more grace.
So it's like we're priming ourselves to recognize our purpose when it pops up, instead of like frantically searching for it in all the wrong places.
Exactly. We're creating the space for it to emerge. Now, speaking of finding that deeper space, Dr. K also dives into the concept of moksha in this stream.
Okay, things are about to get really deep, folks. Tell me more about this moksha.
Well, it's a tricky concept to pin down.
How so?
It's not just about getting what you want or even achieving some blissful state of mind. Dr. K describes it more as a kind of liberation.
Liberation from what?
Suffering, essentially. But it goes even deeper than that. He's talking about liberation that goes beyond even our physical and emotional needs.
So we're talking about like transcendence, enlightenment, reaching nirvana, those sorts of ideas.
You could say that. And Dr. K's own experience adds a really interesting layer to all of this. He mentions having this very vivid experience during meditation.
What happened?
He perceived these eyes looking back at him.
Whoa. Okay, now that's a visual. Did he explain what he thought it meant?
He did, but I think he also emphasized that sometimes, trying to explain these deeply personal experiences, it can kind of diminish their power, both for the person and for those listening.
Right. Like trying to explain a dream, the more you try to put it into words, the more like slippery it becomes.
Exactly. And honestly, it can be really easy to get so caught up in the curiosity of the experience itself that we miss the bigger point.
Okay, so back to moksha and this idea of liberation. How do these experiences, even the ones that are hard to put into words, how do they connect to that?
This is where Dr. K gets, I think, really philosophical.
Yeah.
He starts talking about the limitations of science. As we currently understand it, science is primarily focused on the physical world, right?
Okay.
So we have all these tools to measure brainwaves and things like that. But when it comes to subjective experiences, like seeing something with your eyes closed,
Yeah.
we haven't quite cracked the code yet.
So you're saying we have tools to measure the physical stuff, but when it comes to these more like internal subjective experiences, we're still kind of in the dark.
It's more that we haven't fully developed the tools yet, maybe even the language to explore those realms.
Interesting.
And that's where he suggests that meditation offers this different approach.
Different how?
It's like using our own direct experience as a kind of internal laboratory.
The laboratory for exploring consciousness itself.
Exactly. And he proposes a pretty interesting experiment for those willing to take the plunge.
Oh, what's the experiment?
A decade.
A decade of what?
A decade-long dedicated meditation practice. And we're not just talking about a few minutes here and there. He's talking about a strict yogic lifestyle.
Okay, I can already feel my mind resisting that level of commitment. What's the reasoning there? Why 10 years?
He acknowledges that most of us, we live in this culture of instant gratification.
100%.
Right. We want results, whether it's six-pack abs or, mystical visions, and we want them now.
Guilty as charged. I've definitely abandoned my fair share of workout routines and side hustles when they didn't yield immediate results. It's tough to stick with something when you don't see progress right away.
Right. But Dr. K challenges us to confront that very mindset. He argues that true inner transformation, it takes time, discipline, and a willingness to detach from expectations.
So approaching this practice with a sense of curiosity, not just this like results-driven mentality, what does this decade-long practice actually look like? Give me the Spark Notes version.
He describes a technique called chanting. It's about focusing on the sound and the subtle vibrations it creates in your body.
Okay, I've chanted in a yoga class or two, usually while trying not to faceplant. So what's different about what he's talking about?
It's about refining awareness. So you start by noticing the vibrations, right?
Okay.
And then you notice their location in your body. Then you're smoothing them out, making them subtler, quieter.
It's like fine-tuning an instrument, but the instrument is your own like mind-body system.
Exactly. And he mentions that as people progress with this practice, they often start to perceive unusual things, like their senses are expanding.
Well, he did mention seeing eyes during his own meditation practice.
Right. So while he's careful not to make any promises, he does suggest that this kind of practice, this level of dedication, can lead to really profound shifts in awareness.
And maybe even a glimpse of that moksha we were talking about, liberation from suffering, like beyond our basic needs and wants. It's like a whole other level of existence.
Which brings us back to Dharma, not as this grand predetermined purpose, but as this way of living in harmony with ourselves and the world. It's about the journey.
I like that. It really resonates with me. But something tells me there's more to this story. What else does Dr. K say about finding that harmony? It does feel like we're talking about like fine-tuning our internal antenna or something.
Right.
To pick up on a whole different frequency of like experience.
It's wild, right?
Totally. But how do we even begin to access that?
That is the million-dollar question. And Dr. K actually makes a really interesting point about this.
Okay, what's that?
He says that a lot of modern approaches to meditation, especially the ones that are marketed as, these quick fixes or productivity boosters.
Right, like meditate your way to success.
Exactly. He says they often miss a really crucial piece of the puzzle.
Ooh, okay. What's the missing piece?
He points to all the lifestyle practices that often accompany these deep meditative traditions.
Okay, like what?
We're talking specific diets, abstaining from certain substances, cultivating a high level of mental discipline. It's not just about sitting on a cushion and closing your eyes. It's about creating the right conditions for these subtle shifts in awareness to even occur.
So it's like the time spent meditating is important, but it's almost like it has to be supported by a certain way of living, a way of being in the world.
Exactly. It's like imagine trying to, get into the best physical shape of your life, but you're only working out a few times a week and not paying any attention to your diet or your sleep or how you're recovering. You're probably not going to reach your full potential.
Right. It's like you're only doing half the work.
Exactly. He's saying it's the same with meditation.
Yeah.
These lifestyle practices, they create the foundation.
So those deeper shifts can actually happen. Okay, so are you saying we all need to ditch our morning coffee and become monks to experience real transformation?
Not necessarily. It's not about adopting some rigid set of rules or anything.
Oh.
It's more about, I think, understanding that there's a depth and a nuance to these ancient traditions.
Right.
And the nuance can kind of get lost in translation when we try to adapt them for a modern world.
Yeah, right.
It's about respecting the process, I guess.
Respecting that lasting transformation, especially on a spiritual level, it doesn't happen overnight.
Exactly. It's about more than just checking boxes.
Or trying to force those quick results.
Yeah. It's about a genuine commitment to exploring these practices, seeing how they resonate with your own experience, and then seeing where that takes you. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this whole deep dive, right? There's no one-size-fits-all answer here. Not when it comes to finding purpose, meaning, or even liberation. What works for one person, it might not work for another.
And that's okay.
Exactly. The key is to approach this whole journey with curiosity, with an open mind. So we're not all destined to become enlightened yogis chanting Om for 10 years straight, but we can all benefit from, understanding ourselves better, finding ways to create more harmony in our lives, however that looks for each of us.
So whether it's through a daily walk or a meditation practice, or simply paying closer attention to our thoughts and feelings throughout the day, it's about finding what works for us and then committing to that inner work. And maybe, just maybe, as we cultivate that inner harmony, we become more receptive to like our own unique Dharma, that
Yes,
sense of purpose and right action that maybe, just maybe, has been waiting for us all along.
beautifully said. Or, as Dr. K so eloquently puts it, perhaps our Dharma has been patiently waiting for us all along, and it's simply up to us to become the kind of people who are ready to meet it.
That is a powerful idea to sit with. What if, instead of endlessly searching for our purpose, we focused on becoming the kind of people who are ready to step into it when the time is right? What would that look like for you, dear listener? That's something to ponder on your next walk, or maybe even during a few moments of quiet contemplation. Until next time, keep exploring.